Billionaire finds little girl sleeping on trash Christmas Eve. The shocking truth no one expected. This is the story of a Christmas Eve that shattered everything a man thought he knew about family, love, and the true meaning of wealth. It's a story that will make you question what really matters when the world strips away everything you think you need. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing amazing, wherever you're watching from tonight. Are you curled up somewhere warm with hot cocoa? Or maybe you're like me, staying up way too late because you can't resist a good story? Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're joining us from. I love connecting with all of you. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button because stories like this one remind us why we're all here together, searching for hope and human connection. Now, let me take you into a night that changed everything. The Mercedes heated leather seats couldn't ward off the ice that had settled in Vincent Montoya's chest. Christmas Eve, 11:47 p.m., and he was driving through the city's forgotten arteries, the kind of streets his billion-dollar empire had helped gentrify into non-existence. Streets where broken dreams collected like autumn leaves in gutters. He shouldn't have been here. Should have been in his penthouse, nursing 18-year-old scotch and reviewing quarterly projections. Should have been anywhere but racing through these godforsaken alleys because his ex-wife's final words before signing the divorce papers still echoed in his skull. "You'll die alone, Vincent. All that money, and you'll die completely alone." The engine's purr masked the sound of his phone buzzing again. Probably his assistant, wondering why he dismissed the car service and taken the wheel himself. Vincent didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound pathetic. How do you explain that Christmas Eve had become a mirror, reflecting 38 years of calculated choices that had built him an empire, but hollowed out his soul? Then he saw her, a flash of pink in his peripheral vision, tucked against the dumpster like discarded wrapping paper. Vincent's foot hit the brake so hard the Mercedes fishtailed on black ice, sliding to a stop just feet from the mouth of an alley that reeked of rotting food and broken promises. What he saw made his heart forget how to beat. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7, curled into a ball on top of a pile of trash bags. Her tiny body was wrapped in a threadbare blanket that might have been white once, but now bore the stains of a dozen different disasters. Pink pajamas, the kind with cartoon characters that should have been tucked safely under Christmas trees, peeked through tears in the fabric. She was sleeping, on Christmas Eve, on a pile of garbage, in 20-degree weather. Vincent's hands shook as he killed the engine. This wasn't real. This was some fever dream brought on by too much wine at the office party and too many memories of Christmases when he'd still believed in Santa Claus and second chances. But the cold air that slapped his face when he stepped out of the car was brutally, devastatingly real. The little girl's breath formed tiny clouds in the frozen air, each exhaling a miracle that she was still breathing at all. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his voice shattering the silence like breaking glass. As he moved closer, Vincent noticed details that made his chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in years. Pure, unadulterated terror. Not the calculated fear of hostile takeovers or market crashes. This was primal. This was the fear of a world where children ended up sleeping on piles of trash, while people like him counted money in towers that scraped the sky. The little girl's dark hair was matted against her head, but clean. Someone had tried to take care of her. At least recently. Her small hands clutched something against her chest. A photograph, he realized, though he couldn't make out the faces in the dim streetlight. Vincent knelt beside her, his $1,000 shoes crunching on broken glass. Up close, he could see that her breathing was too shallow, her lips tinged blue despite the blanket. Hypothermia. She was dying, and he was possibly the only person in a 10-block radius who gave a damn. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered, reaching out to touch her shoulder. Her skin was ice-cold through the thin pajama fabric. "Can you hear me?" The little girl's eyes fluttered open, brown eyes that held depths no child should possess. Eyes that had seen too much, understood too much, accepted too much. When she focused on Vincent's face, she didn't cry or scream or show any of the fear a normal child would display when woken by a stranger in a dark alley. Instead, she smiled. "Are you an angel?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper but clear as crystal in the frozen air. "Mama said angels come when you need them most." Vincent's throat closed completely. He'd been called many things in his life. Ruthless, brilliant, cold, successful. Never an angel. Never anything close to what this little girl saw when she looked at him with those impossible eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he managed, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "Lucy," she said, struggling to sit up while still clutching the photograph. "Lucy Sullivan. Are you going to take me to Mama now?" The way she said it, with such absolute faith, such certainty that he would help her, broke something fundamental in Vincent's chest. But it was the photograph she held that stopped his world completely. As Lucy shifted, the streetlight caught the image, and Vincent's blood turned to ice water in his veins. The photograph showed Lucy with a woman who looked exactly like someone Vincent hadn't seen in 15 years. Someone he'd been trying to forget for half his adult life. Someone who'd walked away from him when he chose money over love, ambition over heart. Someone who'd sworn she never wanted to see him again. The woman in the photograph was Sarah. Sarah Chun, the only person who'd ever made him believe he could be more than the sum of his bank accounts. And this little girl, this beautiful, freezing, dying little girl, was looking at him with Sarah's eyes. What if he knew a comment could change someone's Christmas? Drop one below and tell me. Have you ever met someone who changed your life in a single moment? Your stories give me chills every time. Vincent's hands trembled as he gathered Lucy into his arms, her tiny body weighing nothing against the crushing weight of recognition. The photograph fluttered to the ground, but he'd already memorized every pixel. Sarah's radiant smile, Lucy's gap-toothed grin, both of them standing in front of what looked like a small apartment building with peeling paint and dreams that couldn't afford better. "We need to get you warm," he whispered against Lucy's hair, carrying her toward the Mercedes. She didn't protest, just nestled against his coat like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to finally pick her up. The drive to Mount Sinai Hospital passed in a blur of Christmas lights and late-night traffic, but Vincent's mind was 15 years in the past, reliving the moment that had defined every choice since. Sarah Chun had been 23, working double shifts at a community health clinic while finishing her nursing degree. Vincent had been 23 too, but already 3 years into building his first company, already convinced that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. They'd met when he'd foolishly tried to impress a client by volunteering at a charity fundraiser, the kind of calculated generosity that looked good in business magazines. Sarah had seen right through him. "You know," she'd said, sorting donated coats with hands that never stopped moving, never stopped helping. "Most people volunteer because they want to make a difference. You're here because you want people to think you make a difference. There's a universe of space between those two things." She'd been right. She'd always been right. For 6 months, she tried to show him that universe. 6 months of stolen conversations during her break times, of Vincent learning that there were people who measured wealth in smiles instead of stock portfolios. 6 months of falling so completely in love that he'd started questioning everything he thought he wanted, until the merger opportunity came along. The deal that would triple his company's value overnight, but required him to relocate to Singapore for 2 years. Sarah had just been accepted to a master's program in pediatric nursing. She'd finally found her calling, her chance to save children's lives. "Come with me," he'd said, standing in her tiny apartment surrounded by acceptance letters and dreams pinned to bulletin boards. "We'll figure it out. I'll hire the best tutors, set up a foundation, anything you want." "Vincent," she'd said, and her voice had carried the weight of already knowing how this ended. "You're asking me to give up my dream so you can chase yours. And you can't even see why that's not love. That's ownership. I'm offering you the world. You're offering me your world. I already have mine." He'd left for Singapore. She'd started her master's program. They'd promised to stay in touch, promised to find a way, promised all the things that people promise when they're too proud to admit they're saying goodbye forever. 2 years had turned into 5, 5 into 10. By the time Vincent returned to the States, Sarah had vanished completely. No social media presence, no forwarding address, no trace except the hole she'd left in his chest that he'd spent 15 years trying to fill with acquisitions and achievements. Now, cradling Lucy in the hospital waiting room while doctors examined her, Vincent wondered if Sarah had spent those 15 years building something infinitely more valuable than his empire, a family. "Mr. Montoya," Dr. Emma Woodhouse approached with a kind of gentle professionalism that came from delivering news that changed lives. She was young, probably Sarah's age when they'd first met, with tired eyes that had seen too many children brought in too late. "How is she?" Vincent stood, realizing he'd been holding his breath. "Stable. Mild hypothermia, severe dehydration, and she's significantly underweight. But she's strong, stronger than most kids would be in her situation." Dr. Woodhouse studied his face. "The nurses tell me you found her on the street. Do you know anything about her family situation?" Vincent's throat tightened. I might know her mother, but I haven't seen her in 15 years. Well, Lucy's been asking for you. She seems to trust you completely, which is—" Dr. Woodhouse paused, choosing her words carefully. "Children who've been through trauma usually take much longer to open up to strangers. Either you have a gift with kids, or she recognizes something in you." Before Vincent could respond, a voice from the doorway made his heart stop completely. "She recognizes kindness when she sees it. She gets that from her mother." Vincent turned, and there was Sarah Chun, older, wearing the exhausted scrubs of someone who'd been working too many shifts, but still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep, but when she looked at him, 15 years collapsed into nothing. "Hello, Vincent," she said, and her voice carried every conversation they'd never had, every Christmas they'd spent apart, every night she'd probably wondered if things could have been different. "Sarah." Her name felt rusty in his mouth, like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. "I found her in an alley. I didn't know. I couldn't leave her there." Sarah's composure cracked, just slightly. "I've been looking for her for 6 hours. She was staying with my neighbor while I worked a double, and when I got home—" She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Mrs. Patterson said Lucy just vanished. No note, no explanation. I've been driving through every street in the city. How did she end up sleeping on trash?" Vincent's voice came out harsher than he intended. "Where's her father? Why are you working doubles on Christmas Eve instead of home with your daughter?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, and Vincent immediately regretted them. But Sarah just straightened her shoulders. The same movement he remembered from 15 years ago when she decided to choose her dreams over his money. "Lucy's father left when she was 2, Sarah said quietly. "Right around the time she was diagnosed with a rare heart condition that requires specialist care every few months. Care that costs more than most people make in a year. I work doubles because I have to. I sleep 3 hours a night because I have to. I chose to keep her alive instead of comfortable, and I'd make that choice again every single day." The weight of her words hit Vincent like a physical blow. While he'd been building an empire, Sarah had been fighting a war. While he'd been acquiring companies, she'd been acquiring medical bills. While he'd been climbing toward a penthouse, she'd been clawing her way through a healthcare system that treated poor children like acceptable losses. "The heart condition," he said slowly. "Is that why she was so calm when I found her? Kids with medical issues, they get used to emergencies." "Lucy's been in and out of hospitals since she was 18 months old," Sarah confirmed. "She's learned that panic doesn't help anything. She's learned to trust that adults will either help her or they won't, but getting upset won't change the outcome. If this story is hitting you in the feels, you're not alone. I'm sitting here with actual tears writing this. Drop a heart in the comments if you believe every child deserves someone who will fight for them, like Sarah fights for Lucy." Vincent studied Sarah's face, seeing new lines around her eyes, new shadows beneath them, but also seeing strength he'd never noticed before, the kind that came from carrying impossible burdens and somehow still managing to smile. "Why did she run away tonight?" he asked. Sarah's laugh was brittle as winter air. "Because she's 6, and she heard me on the phone with the billing department at Children's Hospital. She heard me begging for another payment extension, heard me promise money I don't have for procedures she needs." Sarah's voice broke just slightly. "She told Mrs. Patterson she was going to find Santa and ask him to make Mama stop crying." The picture clicked into place with devastating clarity. Lucy hadn't run away from Sarah. She'd run away for her. A 6-year-old girl with a broken heart, literally and figuratively, had wandered into the night trying to solve problems that adults couldn't fix. "Can I see her?" Vincent asked. Sarah hesitated, and in that hesitation, Vincent saw 15 years of hurt, of wondering what might have been, of protecting herself and her daughter from people who made promises they couldn't keep. "She's been asking for the angel who found her," Sarah said finally. "She described you perfectly, tall, dark hair, sad eyes but kind hands. She said you picked her up like she mattered. She does matter. I know that. But Lucy's met a lot of adults who don't think poor kids matter very much. Dr. Woodhouse cleared her throat gently. I don't mean to interrupt, but visiting hours technically ended an hour ago. However, given the circumstances and the fact that Lucy specifically asked for both of you, she gestured toward the pediatric ward. Room 314. But please keep it brief. She needs rest. As they walked down the hallway, Vincent caught glimpses of other rooms. Other children spending Christmas Eve in hospital beds. Other families maintaining vigils that should have been celebrations. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. And somewhere in the distance, a child was crying. Sarah, Vincent said, stopping just outside Lucy's room. Before we go in, I need you to know something. She turned, and for a moment, they were 23 again, standing in her apartment, making choices that would define the rest of their lives. I never stopped thinking about you, he said. 15 years, and I never stopped wondering if you were okay, if you were happy, if you ever thought about us. Vincent, I'm not saying this to complicate things. I'm saying it because that little girl in there deserves to know that the man who found her isn't just some stranger. She deserves to know that her mother was loved completely by someone who was too stupid to choose love over money, but who never forgot what love felt like. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. She also deserves to know that her mother loved someone so much that letting him go was the hardest thing she ever did, until she held Lucy for the first time and realized that some kinds of love are worth any sacrifice. They stood there in the hospital hallway, surrounded by the sounds of machines keeping people alive, and Vincent finally understood what Sarah had tried to teach him 15 years ago. Love wasn't about what you could buy for someone. It was about what you were willing to give up for them. The door to room 314 was slightly ajar, and through the gap, Vincent could see Lucy's small form under hospital blankets, finally warm, finally safe. But as they stepped into the room, Lucy's eyes opened immediately, as if she'd been waiting for them. Angel, she said, reaching out tiny arms toward Vincent. You came back. And then, looking at Sarah with eyes that held more wisdom than any 6-year-old should possess, Lucy asked the question that would change everything. Mama, is this my daddy? The one you talked in the pictures when you think I'm sleeping? The silence in room 314 stretched like a tightrope, ready to snap under the weight of Lucy's innocent question. Vincent's world tilted on its axis as he stared at the little girl who had just asked if he was her daddy, while Sarah's face drained of all color. Lucy, sweetheart, Sarah whispered, moving to her daughter's bedside with shaking hands. What pictures are you talking about? Lucy's eyes, those impossible brown eyes that Vincent now realized were exactly like his own, sparkled with the kind of honesty that only children possessed. The ones in your jewelry box. The ones of the man with the sad smile. You hold them when you think I'm sleeping, and you whisper things like, I should have told you, and maybe if things were different. Vincent felt his knees nearly buckle. He gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white against the plastic. Sarah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What is she talking about? Sarah's hands trembled as she smoothed Lucy's hair, buying time she didn't have. When she finally looked up at Vincent, her eyes held 15 years of secrets, of sleepless nights, of decisions that had carved themselves into her soul. Vincent, she began, then stopped. Started again. When you left for Singapore. Mama, Lucy interrupted, reaching for Sarah's hand with the 4 still taped to her tiny arm. Are you going to tell him about the letters? Letters? Vincent stepped closer to the bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. What letters, Lucy? The ones Mama writes but never sends. She writes them on my birthday every year, and on Christmas, and sometimes when I'm really sick and she thinks I might. Lucy, please, Sarah said quickly. But her daughter was in full confession mode, the way children get when they've been carrying adult secrets for too long. She writes about how proud you'd be if you knew me, and how I got my stubbornness from you, and how she wishes things were different, but she made a promise to herself to never make you choose between your dreams and us. The words hit Vincent like physical blows. Each revelation rewrote his understanding of the last 15 years, of every choice he'd made, of every night he'd wondered about Sarah and what might have been. Sarah, his voice came out raw, desperate. Tell me. Just tell me. Sarah closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with a pain so deep it had its own gravitational pull. Lucy is 6 years old. She was born 7 months after you left for Singapore. The math hit Vincent like lightning. 7 months. Not 9. 7 months after he'd walked away from the only woman he'd ever loved to chase a deal that had made him billions, but cost him everything that mattered. You were pregnant, he whispered. When I left, you were pregnant. 8 weeks, Sarah confirmed, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I found out 2 weeks after you left. I stood in that clinic bathroom, staring at a positive pregnancy test, and I had 2 choices: call you and ruin your dreams, or let you go and figure out on my own. That wasn't your choice to make. The words exploded out of Vincent before he could stop them, causing Lucy to flinch. He immediately lowered his voice, but the pain in it was unmistakable. You should have told me. You should have called. You should have. What? Given you an ultimatum? Make you choose between a career-defining opportunity and an unplanned pregnancy with a girl you'd known for 6 months? Sarah's voice carried 15 years of justification, of nights spent convincing herself she'd done the right thing. You'd already made your choice, Vincent. You chose Singapore. You chose the merger. You chose your future. I chose wrong. Vincent's voice broke completely. I chose wrong, and I've spent 15 years trying to fill a hole that nothing could fill because the only thing that mattered walked away from me, and apparently I walked away from her too, and I never even knew. Dr. Woodhouse appeared in the doorway, drawn by raised voices. Is everything all right here? We're fine, Sarah said automatically, the same lie she'd probably been telling for 6 years. Actually, no, Vincent said, his eyes never leaving Lucy's face. We're not fine. Nothing about this is fine. He knelt beside the hospital bed, bringing himself to Lucy's eye level. Lucy, can I ask you something? The little girl nodded solemnly. When you saw me tonight, in that alley, why did you think I was an angel? Lucy considered this with the seriousness that medical children learned early. Every question might be important. Every answer might change something fundamental. Because, she said finally, Mama always said that if I ever really needed help, if I was ever really scared or really alone, that my daddy would find me somehow. She said love doesn't die just because people are apart, and that somewhere, someone who loved me was looking for me, even if he didn't know I existed. Vincent's chest felt like it was caving in. And you thought I was him? Your daddy. You have the same eyes as me, Lucy said simply. And the same hands. Mama showed me pictures. But mostly, you looked at me like I mattered. Mama says that's how daddies look at their little girls. Like they're the most important thing in the whole world. Vincent's vision blurred as he reached out to touch Lucy's cheek. She leaned into his palm like she'd been waiting her whole life for that exact touch. Lucy, he whispered, what if I told you that your mama was right? What if I told you that I've been looking for you, even though I didn't know you existed? What if I told you that you're the most important thing in the whole world, and I just didn't know it until tonight? Does that mean you're really my daddy? Lucy asked, hoping to make her voice bright despite the exhaustion. Vincent looked at Sarah, seeing his own reflection in her tear-filled eyes. Seeing the fear there, the protectiveness, but also something else, relief. The relief of someone who'd been carrying a secret too heavy for one person to bear. Yes, he said, the word coming out like a prayer. Yes, Lucy, I'm your daddy, and I'm so sorry it took me so long to find you. Lucy's smile was radiant, transforming her pale face into something luminous. But then her expression grew serious again, the way it did when she was thinking about grown-up problems. Daddy, she said, testing the word like it might disappear if she said it wrong. Are you going to leave again? Because Mama cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. And I think it's because people always leave. Even my other daddy left when I got sick. Vincent's heart shattered completely. This little girl, his daughter, had learned that love was temporary, that people left when things got difficult, that being sick made you a burden instead of a blessing. Lucy, he said, taking her small hands in his much larger ones. I need you to listen to me very carefully, okay? I am never, ever going to leave you again. Not when you're sick, not when you're scared, not when things get difficult. Never. Do you understand? But what about your work? Mama says important people have important work that takes them far away. Common's family. Tell me you're not crying right now, because I'm a mess over here. Have you ever had a moment that changed your entire life in one sentence? Drop those stories below because I need to know I'm not alone in these feelings. Vincent glanced at Sarah, then back at Lucy. In that moment, staring into his daughter's eyes, every merger, every acquisition, every billion-dollar deal seemed as insignificant as dust. Lucy, the most important work I'll ever do is being your daddy. Everything else is just everything else. But even as he made that promise, Vincent's mind was racing. Lucy needed medical care he could provide. Sarah was working herself to death, trying to afford treatments. His daughter, had been sleeping on trash because her mother was too proud to ask for help from a man who didn't even know she existed. The central challenge wasn't just learning he was a father. It was figuring out how to build a family with a woman who'd spent 6 years learning to survive without him, and a daughter who'd learned that love was something that disappeared when life got too hard. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a darker thought was forming. Lucy's heart condition, the medical bills that were crushing Sarah, the reason Lucy's other father had left. Vincent was going to need answers. Real answers. Because no one walked away from a sick child unless there was more to the story than Sarah was telling him. Sarah, he said quietly, we need to talk. About everything. About Lucy's condition, about the bills, about what happens next. Sarah nodded, exhaustion written in every line of her body. I know. But Vincent, you need to understand, I didn't keep Lucy from you to hurt you. I kept her from you to protect you. Because I knew that if you knew about her, you'd sacrifice everything for us, and I couldn't let you do that. That should have been my choice to make. I know, Sarah whispered. I know that now. But Vincent, there's more you need to know about Lucy's condition. About why her father really left. About why the medical bills are so high, and why I'm so scared all the time. Vincent's blood chilled. What aren't you telling me? Lucy's eyes had grown heavy, the exhaustion and medication finally catching up with her. But before she drifted off to sleep, she squeezed Vincent's hand with surprising strength. Daddy, she murmured, will you still be here when I wake up? I'll be here, he promised. I'll be right here. As Lucy's breathing even into sleep, Sarah gestured toward the hallway. Whatever she needed to tell him, it was something Lucy shouldn't hear. And Vincent knew, with the certainty that came from 6 years of watching his daughter fight for her life, that everything was about to get much more complicated. In the sterile hallway outside Lucy's room, fluorescent lights hummed overhead like trapped wasps. Vincent followed Sarah to a small family consultation room, the kind of space designed for conversations that changed everything. Through the window, he could see the city's Christmas lights twinkling like false promises in the distance. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, as if she could somehow keep the weight of the world from pressing in. When she looked at Vincent, her eyes held the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting a war alone for too long. Lucy's heart condition isn't just rare, Sarah began, her voice steady but fragile. It's progressive, and it's getting worse. Vincent felt his newly discovered paternal instincts surge, primal and fierce. What does that mean exactly? It means that the procedures she's had so far, they've been buying time, not fixing the problem. She needs a full cardiac reconstruction, Vincent. Surgery that costs close to $2 million, requires a team of specialists, and has a success rate of about 60%. The numbers hit him like physical blows. Not because of the money, $2 million was pocket change to someone worth $14 billion, but because of what they represented. A 60% chance. His daughter had a 40% chance of not surviving the surgery she needed to live. When? He asked. The cardiologist wants to schedule it for February. Says we can't wait much longer than that. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Says that by her 7th birthday, it might be too late. Vincent's mind immediately shifted into the calculating mode that had built his empire. I'll call my team tomorrow. We'll get her into Johns Hopkins, or the Cleveland Clinic, or wherever has the best pediatric cardiac program in the world. Money isn't an issue. Vincent, stop. The sharpness in Sarah's voice made him pause. She was looking at him with something between gratitude and fury, and he couldn't understand why she wasn't already reaching for her phone to start making arrangements. Stop what? Stop trying to help my daughter. Stop trying to fix everything with money. Sarah pushed away from the door, pacing the small room like a caged animal. Do you think I haven't already researched every hospital, every surgeon, every possible option? Do you think I've spent 6 years watching my daughter suffer because I didn't think of throwing money at the problem? Vincent felt his own temper flare. Then what's the issue? I have the resources to give Lucy the best care in the world. Why are we even having this conversation? Because it's not that simple. Sarah whirled to face him, her eyes blazing. The best cardiac surgeon for Lucy's specific condition is Dr. Michael Rivers at Seattle Children's. I've been on his waiting list for 8 months. The surgery Lucy needs isn't just about money. It's about timing and compatibility and a dozen other factors that can't be bought. Then we'll make it about money. We'll donate enough to the hospital to build a new wing. Vincent. Sarah's voice cut through his planning like a knife. Listen to yourself. You've been Lucy's father for exactly 2 hours, and you're already trying to buy your way into her life. The words stung because they held a grain of truth. Vincent had spent 15 years solving problems with acquisitions and investments. But this wasn't a hostile takeover. This was his daughter's life. I'm trying to save her, he said quietly. So am I. I've been trying to save her every single day for 6 years. Sarah's voice softened slightly, but the steel remained. But Vincent, there's something else you need to know about Lucy's condition. Something I haven't told you. Vincent's blood chilled. What? Sarah sat down heavily in one of the uncomfortable chairs, suddenly looking every one of her 38 years. The heart defect Lucy has, it's not random. It's genetic. Specifically, it's inherited from the father's side. The room seemed to tilt around Vincent. You're saying I gave this to her? The marker for it, yes. It's a rare genetic variant that causes progressive cardiac deterioration. Most children who inherit it don't live past their 10th birthday without surgical intervention. Vincent sank into the chair across from Sarah, the weight of guilt crushing down on him. His daughter was dying because of something she'd inherited from him. His DNA was slowly killing the most precious thing he'd never known he had. Is that why he left? Vincent asked, the words coming out rawer than he intended. Lucy's stepfather. Is that why he couldn't handle it? Sarah's laugh was bitter as the winter wind. David left because when Lucy was 2 and needed her first surgery, the genetic testing revealed that he wasn't her biological father. He'd been raising another man's child for 2 years, watching me pour every dollar we had into medical bills for a daughter who wasn't biologically his. Jesus, Sarah, you never told him. I never told anyone. I convinced myself that Lucy's father was better off not knowing, and that David was better off believing she was his. I thought I could handle it all on my own. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. David had every right to be angry. He'd signed up to be a stepfather, not to bankrupt himself for a child that wasn't his. Vincent tried to process this information, but his mind kept circling back to one central fact. Sarah had been alone through all of this. Alone through the diagnosis, alone through the treatments, alone through watching their daughter fight for her life while the man she'd trusted to help her walked away. I would never have walked away, he said fiercely, if I had known. Vincent, you walked away before you even knew she existed, Sarah pointed out, not unkindly. You chose Singapore over us before we even became an us. That's different, is it? Sarah studied his face. Because what I see is a man who's built an empire, but doesn't know how to be still. A man who thinks every problem can be solved with enough money and enough power. But Vincent, being Lucy's father, isn't a merger you can negotiate. It's a life you have to live, one day at a time, with no guarantees about the outcome. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, turning her words over in his mind. She was right, of course. He'd spent 15 years learning how to control markets and influence outcomes. But parenthood wasn't something you could control. It was something you could only experience. Teach me, he said finally. What? Teach me how to be her father. Not the father who writes checks and makes phone calls, but the father who shows up when she's scared at 3 in the morning. The father who knows her favorite bedtime story and what makes her laugh when she's in pain. Sarah's expression softened slightly. Vincent, it's not that simple. Lucy's been through so much already. She's learned to be cautious about letting people get close because she's seen what happens when they leave. You can't just walk in and expect her to trust you completely because we share DNA. Then how do I earn it? By being consistent, by being present, by proving that you're not going anywhere when things get difficult. Sarah paused, and by understanding that loving Lucy means accepting that you might lose her and choosing to love her anyway. The brutal honesty of that statement hit Vincent square in the chest. He'd spent his adult life minimizing risk, hedging bets, ensuring positive outcomes. But loving a child with a terminal condition meant accepting the possibility of the worst outcome imaginable and choosing love anyway. Drop a comment if you've ever had to love someone knowing you might lose them. This kind of courage deserves to be witnessed. What does she need from me right now? Vincent asked. Not the medical stuff, not the money. What does Lucy need from her father? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. She needs to know that you see her as more than her condition. She spent her whole life being the sick kid to doctors, to teachers, to other children who don't understand why she can't run as far or play as hard as they can. She needs to know that to you. She's just Lucy. She's just Lucy. She's perfect. She's not perfect, Vincent. She's brave, funny, and incredibly smart. But she's also stubborn and dramatic, and sometimes manipulative in the way that kids who spend a lot of time with adults learn to be. She's not a saint just because she's sick. Vincent smiled despite everything. She gets stubborn from both sides, doesn't she? Oh, definitely. That child can negotiate with world leaders. Sarah's expression grew serious again. Vincent, if you're really going to do this, if you're really going to be her father, you need to understand what you're signing up for. Hospital stays that last week's. Procedures that hurt her but keep her alive. Nights when she can't sleep because her chest hurts and there's nothing you can do except hold her and tell her stories. Are you ready for that? Vincent thought about his penthouse apartment, silent and sterile. About his calendar, packed with meetings that suddenly seemed meaningless. About the life he'd built that looked successful from the outside but felt empty from within. I'm ready, he said. But Sarah, I need you to be ready too. Ready for what? Ready to let me help. It really helps. Not just with the medical bills, but with everything. With midnight fevers and bedtime stories and school events, and all the normal stuff that normal families do. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for hours. Vincent, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to share her. I've been her everything for so long. You won't be sharing her. You'll be sharing the responsibility for her. There's a difference. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Woodhouse appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a development with Lucy's case. Vincent's heart stopped. Is she all right? She's stable, but I've been reviewing her recent test results, and I think we need to move up our timeline. The deterioration in her cardiac function is progressing faster than we anticipated. Dr. Woodhouse looked between Vincent and Sarah. I'd like to contact Dr. Rivers in Seattle tomorrow and see if we can get Lucy in for evaluation within the next few weeks rather than waiting until February. Of course, Vincent said immediately. Whatever she needs. Mr. Montoya, I should mention that even if Dr. Rivers agrees to see Lucy, there are no guarantees. Her case is complex, and the surgery she needs. Dr. Woodhouse paused. It's the kind of procedure that only gets attempted when it's the only option left. As Dr. Woodhouse left them alone again, Vincent saw his own fear reflected in Sarah's eyes. They'd found each other again after 15 years, discovered they had a daughter together, and now faced the possibility of losing her before they'd even had a chance to be a family. Sarah, Vincent said quietly, whatever happens with Lucy, whatever we have to face, we're going to face it together. I know I don't have a right to ask for your trust after everything that's happened, but, Vincent, Sarah reached across the space between them and took his hand. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was strong. I've been afraid to hope for help for so long that I forgot what it felt like to not be alone in this. Their eyes met, and Vincent felt something shift between them. Not just the recognition of shared parenthood, but something deeper. The ember of what they'd once been to each other, still glowing despite 15 years of separation. We're not alone anymore, he said. No, Sarah agreed. We're not. But even as they sat there, hands clasped, both of them knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Because saving Lucy would require more than money or determination. It would require the kind of miracle that came not from medical procedures, but from the complicated mathematics of love, forgiveness, and second chances. And somewhere in the back of Vincent's mind, a question was forming that would change everything. If Lucy's condition was genetic, and if it came from the father's side, then why had all her medical records listed David as her biological father for the first 2 years of her life? unless someone had been deliberately hiding the truth about Lucy's parentage from the very beginning. Vincent was reviewing Lucy's medical files on his phone when Sarah's voice cut through the quiet of the family consultation room like a blade through silk. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice carrying a weight that made Vincent look up immediately. "Something I should have told you hours ago, but I was afraid you'd think I was lying." Vincent set his phone aside, giving her his complete attention. There was something different in Sarah's posture now, a tension that went beyond exhaustion, beyond worry about Lucy. This was the tension of someone preparing to detonate a bomb that would destroy everything. "What is it?" Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands, scrolling through what appeared to be a long list of contacts. "I need you to see something. But first, I need you to promise me that you'll let me explain everything before you react." "Sarah, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too." She handed him the phone, and Vincent found himself staring at a call log that made his blood turn to ice. The screen showed dozens of calls to his office number, spanning 6 years. Not recent calls. These went back to when Lucy was a baby. Call after call, some lasting only a few seconds, others showing connection times of several minutes. "I don't understand," Vincent said, though part of him was beginning to. "Keep scrolling," Sarah whispered. Vincent scrolled down, and the pattern became clear. Sarah had called his office dozens of times over the years. On Lucy's first birthday. On the anniversary of the day he'd left for Singapore. On Christmas Eve 3 years ago, when Lucy had nearly died from complications during a procedure. "You called me," he said, his voice hollow. "All these years you called me. I tried to reach you when Lucy was 6 months old and first diagnosed. I tried again when she was 2 and needed her first surgery. I tried when David left, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for her medications." Sarah's voice was steady, but tears were streaming down her face. "I tried to reach you 17 times, Vincent. 17 times I swallowed my pride and called your office." Vincent stared at the call log, each entry representing a moment when Sarah had needed him and he hadn't known. "I never got any of these calls. Not one." "I know." "Then who?" Vincent stopped, a cold realization washing over him. Margaret Kellner, his executive assistant for the past 8 years. The woman who managed his calendar, screened his calls, and had access to every aspect of his business and personal life. The woman he'd trusted implicitly to handle anything that wasn't worth his immediate attention. "The first few times I called, I got transferred around to different departments," Sarah continued. "But eventually, I started getting the same person, a woman with a very professional voice who told me that you were unavailable and asked if she could take a message." Vincent's hands were shaking now. "What messages did you leave?" "Everything. I told her about Lucy's diagnosis. I sent medical records to your office email. I even sent photos." Sarah's voice broke completely. "Vincent, I sent that woman pictures of your daughter for 6 years, begging you to call me back, and I never heard a word." The room was spinning. Vincent pulled out his own phone and scrolled through his email, searching for any trace of communications from Sarah. Nothing. Not a single email, not a forwarded message. Not even a note from Margaret mentioning that someone named Sarah Chun had been trying to reach him. "She deleted everything," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Every email, every message, every photo of my daughter. She deleted all of it." "Vincent, there's more." "More?" Sarah pulled up another screen on her phone, a bank statement that made Vincent's chest constrict. 3 years ago, when Lucy needed emergency surgery and I was facing bankruptcy, I got a call from someone claiming to be from your legal department. They offered me a settlement. A settlement for what? For agreeing to never contact you again. $50,000 in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement stating that I would never attempt to reach you or claim that Lucy was your child. Vincent's vision went red around the edges. "You took it." "I turned it down." Sarah's voice was fierce. "I told them that I wasn't trying to extort you, that I just wanted you to know your daughter existed. That's when they told me you'd already been informed about Lucy and had specifically instructed them to handle the situation without any further contact." "That's a lie. I know that now." "But Vincent, I was 24 hours away from losing my apartment. Lucy needed surgery that would cost more than I did in 2 years. And someone from your company was telling me that you didn't want anything to do with us." Sarah's voice cracked. "So I stopped calling. I convinced myself that you'd made your choice, and I focused on keeping Lucy alive." Vincent stood up abruptly, pacing the small room like a caged animal. His mind was racing, connecting dots that painted a picture so ugly he could barely comprehend it. Margaret had been intercepting Sarah's calls for years. She'd been deleting emails, blocking messages, and had even arranged for someone to offer Sarah money to stay away. Why? He asked, though part of him was beginning to understand. Why would she do this? Vincent, how much is your company worth? About $14 billion, depending on market fluctuations. But I don't see what that has to do with. He stopped, the implication hitting him like a physical blow. The inheritance clause. Sarah looked confused. What inheritance clause? My company's board insisted on a succession plan when we went public 5 years ago. If I die without legitimate heirs, my controlling shares get distributed according to a complex formula that would essentially give Margaret's husband, who's one of my board members, controlling interest in the company. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Margaret hadn't just been screening his calls. She'd been protecting her own financial interests. Lucy's existence threatened a billion-dollar inheritance scheme that had been years in the making. She knew, Vincent said, his voice hollow. All this time, she knew I had a daughter, and she made sure I never found out because Lucy's existence would have changed everything. Vincent, there's something else. Something I found out yesterday that made me finally understand why Lucy ended up in that alley tonight. Vincent turned to look at Sarah, afraid of what she was about to tell him. I got a call from Lucy's school counselor yesterday afternoon. Apparently, Lucy's been telling her classmates that her real daddy was going to come find her for Christmas, and that he was a very important man who could fix everything that was wrong. How could she know that? Because someone's been talking to her. Sarah's voice was tight with controlled fury. The counselor said a woman called the school last week, claiming to be from your office, asking questions about Lucy's schedule, her medical appointments, her home situation. Vincent felt like he was falling through space. Margaret's been watching Lucy. More than watching. Vincent, I think someone's been deliberately keeping Lucy's condition from stabilizing. Her medications have been inconsistent lately. Doses that should last a month are running out in 3 weeks. Sometimes I find pills that look different from what the pharmacy usually gives us. The implication was so monstrous that Vincent couldn't process it at first. You think someone's been sabotaging Lucy's treatment? I think someone's been making sure that I stay desperate enough to never dig too deep into why you never responded to my calls. And I think that same someone realized that Lucy was getting old enough to start asking questions about her father, so they decided to take more direct action. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text message. Margaret's name appeared on the screen, and the message made his blood freeze. Mr. Montoya, I understand you're at the hospital with a family emergency. I've cleared your calendar for the rest of the week and told the board you're dealing with a personal matter. Hope everything works out for the best. She knows, Vincent said, showing Sarah the message. She knows I found Lucy. Vincent, if I'm right, if Margaret's been orchestrating all of this, then Lucy running away tonight wasn't an accident. Someone wanted you to find her. Why would she want that if she's been keeping us apart for 6 years? Sarah's face had gone pale. Because Lucy's getting sicker. The surgery she needs is expensive and complicated, and there's no guarantee it will work. But if you found Lucy naturally, if you fell in love with her and then lost her, I'd be emotionally destroyed and wouldn't be thinking clearly about business decisions. Vincent finished, the full scope of Margaret's manipulation becoming clear. She's been playing a long game. Keep us apart while Lucy was young and might not survive anyway. But bring us together now, so that if Lucy dies, I'm too grief-stricken to pay attention to what's happening with the company. And if Lucy lives, then Margaret claims she was protecting me from gold diggers and emotional manipulation and positions herself as the loyal employee who always had my best interests at heart. The two of them sat in stunned silence, processing the enormity of what they'd uncovered. Margaret hadn't just stolen 6 years of Vincent's relationship with his daughter. She potentially endangered Lucy's life in service of a billion-dollar scheme. Vincent, Sarah said quietly, what are we going to do? Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, and saw 15 years of love and pain and resilience carved into the face of the only woman who'd ever made him want to be better than he was. He saw the mother who'd fought alone for their daughter's life while he'd unknowingly built an empire that was being stolen from under him. We're going to save Lucy, he said, his voice carrying the kind of certainty that had built companies and toppled competitors. And then we're going to destroy Margaret Kellner. The comment section is about to explode, and I'm here for it. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was working against you? Drop those betrayal stories because this revelation has me shook. Sarah reached for his hand, and when their fingers intertwined, Vincent felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. The sense that he wasn't facing the world alone anymore. "Vincent," Sarah said, "before we go to war with your assistant, I need you to know something else." "What?" "I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought you'd abandoned us. Even when I convinced myself you were better off without us. I never stopped loving you." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And if we're going to fight for Lucy together, if we're going to be her parents together, I need you to know that this isn't just about her. This is about us too." Vincent brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Sarah, I built an empire trying to fill the hole you left in my life. But sitting here with you, knowing we have a daughter together, knowing we're going to fight for her, I finally understand what wealth actually means." "What's that?" "It means having people worth fighting for." Through the window, Christmas morning was beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. But in room 314, Lucy was sleeping fitfully, her small body fighting a battle that had been made infinitely harder by the greed and manipulation of someone Vincent had trusted completely. The war for Lucy's life was about to begin. But first, they had to survive the revelation that would either unite them forever or destroy any chance they had of becoming the family they were meant to be. Because Sarah had one more secret she hadn't told him yet. And this one would change everything. The revelation Sarah was about to make died on her lips as alarms began shrieking throughout the pediatric ward. Vincent's blood turned to ice as he recognized the sound. The specific, urgent beeping that meant a child's life was in immediate danger. Dr. Woodhouse's voice echoed over the intercom. "Code Blue, room 314. Code Blue, room 314. "Lucy," Sarah whispered, and then they were both running. Vincent burst through the door to find his daughter's small body convulsing on the hospital bed. Her lips blue, her eyes rolled back. A team of medical professionals swarmed around her, their movements precise but desperate. "What's happening?" Vincent demanded, but Dr. Woodhouse was already pushing past him. "Her heart's in arrhythmia," she called out, her hands flying over machines that Vincent didn't understand. "Give me 2 milligrams of epinephrine and prep the crash cart." Sarah pressed herself against the wall, her hand over her mouth, watching their daughter fight for her life. Vincent tried to reach for her, to offer comfort, but she pulled away from his touch. "This is my fault," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "This is all my fault." "Sarah, no. You don't understand." She turned to face him, and the guilt in her eyes was so profound it took his breath away. "Vincent, there's something I haven't told you about tonight. About why Lucy really ended up in that alley." "What are you talking about?" Dr. Woodhouse looked up from Lucy's bedside. "I need you both to step outside. Now." "I'm not leaving her," Vincent said fiercely. "Mr. Montoya, if you want your daughter to have the best chance of survival, you need to let us work. Please." Reluctantly, Vincent allowed himself to be ushered into the hallway, where Sarah immediately collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "Sarah, tell me what you meant. How is this your fault?" She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Because I lied to you tonight. About everything." Vincent felt the world tilt around him. "What do you mean, everything?" "Lucy didn't run away to find Santa," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "She ran away because she overheard a phone conversation I had with Margaret Kellner." The name hit Vincent like a physical blow. "You talked to Margaret? When?" 3 days ago. She called me directly, not through your office. She told me that you'd finally learned about Lucy and that you were furious. She said you were planning to sue for full custody, that you were going to take Lucy away from me and make sure I never saw her again." Vincent stared at Sarah, trying to process what she was telling him. "And you believed her?" "She knew things, Vincent. Things about Lucy that only someone close to you would know. She knew about Lucy's heart condition, about the surgery she needs, about how desperate I've been for help." Sarah's voice cracked. "She told me that you'd said I was an unfit mother who'd kept your daughter from you out of spite, and that you were going to make me pay for every day I'd stolen from you." "Sarah, that's insane. I would never." But I didn't know that. Sarah stood up, pacing the hallway like a caged animal. Vincent, the last time I saw you, you walked away from me to chase a business deal. For 6 years, I convinced myself that you'd made your choice, that money and success mattered more to you than love. When Margaret called and told me you were planning to destroy me, it fit everything I believed about who you'd become. Vincent felt like he was drowning. So what did you do? I panicked. I started making plans to disappear with Lucy. I was going to take her and run, find somewhere you couldn't find us. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper now. Lucy overheard me on the phone with a friend, making arrangements to leave town. She heard me say that her father was trying to take her away from me. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. So she ran away to find me herself. She wanted to ask you to please not take her away from me. She thought if she could talk to you, if she could explain how much I love her, you might change your mind. Sarah was sobbing now. Vincent, our daughter spent Christmas Eve sleeping on trash because she was trying to save me from losing her. Vincent sank into a chair, the weight of everything crushing down on him. Lucy's condition, Margaret's manipulation, Sarah's lies. It was all connected in a web of deception that had nearly cost his daughter her life. Why didn't you tell me this when I found her? Because when I saw you with her, when I saw how you looked at her, I realized that Margaret had been lying. You weren't the monster she described. You were just a man who'd found his daughter and fallen in love with her. Sarah wiped her eyes. But by then, I was terrified that if you knew the truth, that Lucy's medical crisis was triggered by stress from my plans to run away with her, you'd realize that Margaret was right about me being an unfit mother. Vincent's phone buzzed with another text from Margaret. So sorry to hear about the little girl's medical emergency. I've taken the liberty of contacting your legal team to discuss custody arrangements. We need to protect your interests. She's still playing us, Vincent said, showing Sarah the message. Even now, even with Lucy fighting for her life, Margaret's manipulating the situation. Dr. Woodhouse emerged from Lucy's room, her expression grim. She's stable for now, but barely. The stress on her system has accelerated the deterioration of her heart function. We need to get her to Seattle immediately. How soon? Vincent asked. Tonight. I've already called Dr. Rivers, and he's agreed to see her on an emergency basis. But Vincent, I need you to understand, the surgery Lucy needs is experimental. There are only a handful of surgeons in the world who can perform it, and the success rate. What's the success rate? Sarah asked, though from her expression, she already knew it wasn't good. 40%. And that's if everything goes perfectly. The hallway fell silent except for the sound of machines keeping other children alive. Vincent stared at the closed door to Lucy's room, knowing that behind it lay the most important person in his life, fighting a battle she might not win. There's more, Dr. Woodhouse said quietly. Given Lucy's current condition, Dr. Rivers can only operate if he has complete medical decision-making authority, which means one of you needs to be designated as her primary guardian for the purposes of the surgery. Vincent and Sarah looked at each other, the implication clear. Only one of them could make the decisions that would determine whether Lucy lived or died. It should be Sarah, Vincent said immediately. She's been Lucy's mother for 6 years. She knows her better than anyone. Vincent, no. Sarah's voice was firm. You have the resources to give her the best possible care. You can afford the experimental treatments, the follow-up surgeries, everything she might need. I can't. This isn't about money. Yes, it is. Sarah's voice echoed through the hallway. Vincent, if Lucy survives this surgery, she's going to need years of specialized care. Care that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Care that I can't provide, but you can. Dr. Woodhouse cleared her throat. I need a decision within the hour. The medical transport to Seattle is standing by. As she walked away, Vincent and Sarah found themselves alone in the hallway, facing an impossible choice. Save their daughter by giving up their parental rights, or keep their rights and potentially watch her die. Sarah, Vincent said quietly, there has to be another way. There is. Sarah pulled a manila envelope from her purse, documents she'd apparently been carrying for days. Custody papers, pre-signed. All you have to do is file them, and Lucy becomes legally yours. She gets the surgery she needs, the care she deserves, and the father who can give her everything I can't. Vincent stared at the papers, understanding flooding through him. This is what you were planning all along. Before Margaret called you, before you planned to run, you were planning to give Lucy to me. I've been planning this for months, Sarah admitted. Ever since the doctors told me how serious her condition was getting. Vincent, I love Lucy more than my own life, but love doesn't cure heart defects. Money does. What about us? Vincent's voice was raw. What about what we talked about earlier, about being a family, about facing this together? Sarah's smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. Vincent, there is no us. There's Lucy, and there's what's best for Lucy. And what's best for her is having a father who can afford to keep her alive. Vincent's phone rang, Margaret's name on the screen. When he answered, her voice was syrupy with false concern. Vincent, darling, I just heard about the little girl's condition. How absolutely tragic. I've arranged for the company jet to transport her to Seattle, and I've already spoken with the legal team about fast-tracking the custody arrangements. Custody arrangements? Well, obviously you'll want full custody. The mother has proven herself to be unstable, running away with a sick child, causing medical emergencies through her poor judgment. No court would leave a child with someone so clearly unfit. Vincent looked at Sarah, who had obviously heard every word through the phone. Her face had gone completely white. The legal papers are already drawn up, Margaret continued. Emergency custody, with permanent custody to follow. All you need to do is sign them, and this whole unfortunate situation becomes much more manageable. Manageable? Vincent, I know this is emotional, but think about it logically. You're a billionaire with unlimited resources. She's a single mother with a history of keeping her child from you. This is what's best for everyone. Vincent ended the call and looked at Sarah, seeing his own devastation reflected in her eyes. Margaret had orchestrated this entire situation, the separation, the medical crisis, even the custody battle, all to serve her own interests. She's been planning this for years, Sarah whispered. Everything that's happened, it's all been leading to this moment. You get Lucy, I lose her completely, and Margaret gets to position herself as the hero who made it all possible. Through the window of Lucy's room, they could see their daughter, unconscious and fighting for her life, surrounded by machines that were the only things keeping her alive. Vincent, Sarah said, pressing the custody papers into his hands, promise me something. What? Promise me that when Lucy wakes up, you'll tell her that I love her. That everything I did was because I love her. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face. And promise me that you'll be the father I always knew you could be. As Sarah walked away, heading for the elevator that would take her out of Lucy's life forever, Vincent realized that Margaret had achieved the impossible. She'd given him his daughter and destroyed his heart in the same moment. In less than 24 hours, he discovered he was a father, fallen in love with his daughter, rediscovered his love for Sarah, and now faced the choice between saving Lucy's life and losing the only woman he'd ever loved. The comments are going to be unreal on this one. Have you ever had to choose between two impossible options? Drop your stories below because I need to know we're all going through this emotional devastation together. And in room 314, Lucy's heart monitor continued its steady beeping, the only sound standing between hope and the kind of loss that destroyed people completely. Vincent stood in the hospital hallway, custody papers in one hand, his phone in the other, watching Sarah disappear into the elevator. Every rational part of his mind said she was right. He had the resources to save Lucy, and that's what mattered most. But as the elevator doors closed, taking away the only woman he'd ever loved, Vincent realized something that 15 years of building an empire had failed to teach him. He was about to make the same mistake twice. No, he said aloud, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. No, this isn't how this ends. He turned back toward Lucy's room, but stopped when he heard a small voice through the slightly open door. Daddy? Mama? Where did everybody go? Vincent pushed through the door to find Lucy awake, her brown eyes, his eyes, alert despite the maze of tubes and wires surrounding her small body. The color had returned to her cheeks, and though she looked fragile, she was undeniably alive. Hey, sweetheart, Vincent said, moving to her bedside. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, but Mama says that's not polite to say in hospitals. Lucy's smile was weak, but genuine. Where's Mama? Is she still scared of you? Scared of me? She's been scared of you my whole life, Lucy said with the matter-of-fact honesty that only children possess. She talks to your picture and says she's sorry she couldn't be brave enough to tell you about me. But Daddy, I think you're not scary at all. You have sad eyes like mine. Vincent felt his heart crack open. Lucy, what do you remember about tonight? About why you were in that alley? I remember hearing Mama cry on the phone. She said someone was going to take me away from her because she wasn't good enough. Lucy reached for Vincent's hand with surprising strength. But Daddy, Mama is the best mama in the whole world. She works really hard to take care of me, and she never gets mad when I'm sick, and she always knows exactly what to do when my chest hurts. I know she is, sweetheart. So I thought if I could find you and tell you how good Mama is, maybe you wouldn't take me away. But then I got lost and really cold, and I thought maybe I made a mistake. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Did I make everything worse by running away? Vincent squeezed her hand gently. No, Lucy, you didn't make anything worse. You're the bravest little girl I've ever met. Brave like Mama. Exactly like Mama. Lucy was quiet for a moment, studying Vincent's face with an intensity that reminded him of Sarah. Daddy, are you going to take me away from Mama? What would you think about that? I think it would make everyone sad. You'd be sad because Mama wouldn't be there, and Mama would be sad because I wouldn't be there, and I'd be sad because families are supposed to be together. Lucy's voice was getting stronger, more determined. And I think maybe the reason grown-ups make things so complicated is because they forget that love isn't about having to choose. Love is about making room for everyone. Vincent stared at his 6-year-old daughter, realizing she'd just articulated something he'd spent his entire adult life failing to understand. Love wasn't a zero-sum game. Having enough resources to save Lucy didn't mean he had to lose Sarah. Being Lucy's father didn't mean Sarah had to stop being her mother. Lucy, what if I told you there might be a way for all of us to be together? For me to be your daddy, and for Mama to keep being your mama, and for us to be a real family. I'd say that sounds perfect, but grown-ups usually have lots of reasons why perfect things can't happen. Vincent pulled out his phone and called his personal attorney. Not the company legal team that Margaret had access to, but Jonathan Price, a man who'd handled Vincent's private affairs for years and had no connection to the corporate structure Margaret was trying to manipulate. Jonathan, I need you at Mount Sinai Hospital immediately. And I need you to bring everything. Recording equipment, custody specialists, fraud investigators. Everything. Vincent, it's Christmas morning. Jonathan, someone's been stealing emails and intercepting communications for years, potentially endangering a child's life in the process. If that's not worth Christmas morning, I don't know what is. As Vincent ended the call, Dr. Woodhouse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Montoya, I need to know about the custody arrangements. The transport to Seattle is ready to leave. Doctor, what if I told you that both parents could travel with Lucy? That there doesn't need to be a choice between us? I'd say that would be ideal, but my understanding was that there were legal complications. There are, but we're going to solve them. Vincent looked at Lucy, then back at Dr. Woodhouse. How long do we have before we absolutely have to leave for Seattle? 3 hours. Maybe 4 if Lucy's vitals continue to improve. That's enough time. Vincent stepped into the hallway and called the elevator, his heart pounding as he waited. When the doors opened, Sarah was still there, slumped against the back wall, crying silently. Sarah, I need you to come back upstairs. Vincent, please don't make this harder than it already is. I'm not taking the custody deal. Sarah's head snapped up. What? I'm not signing the papers. I'm not taking Lucy away from you. And I'm not letting Margaret Kellner destroy our family. Vincent stepped into the elevator, letting the doors close behind him. Lucy's awake, and she has something to say about all this. Something I think you need to hear. Drop a comment if you've ever had a 6-year-old teach you something about life that adults couldn't figure out. Kids see the truth in ways that blow my mind every time. Back in Lucy's room, Sarah approached the bed hesitantly, as if she were afraid her daughter might disappear. Mama. Lucy's face lit up. Daddy says you're not going anywhere. Sweetheart, it's complicated. No, it's not, Lucy said firmly. Mama, you always tell me that when something's really important, you find a way to make it work instead of making excuses for why it can't work. Having a family is really important. Sarah looked at Vincent, confusion and hope warring in her expression. Vincent, what are you talking about? The custody papers, the surgery, the money. Sarah, I spent 15 years building a fortune to fill a hole that could only be filled by love. I'm not going to spend the next 15 years being rich and miserable when I could be wealthy in the ways that actually matter. But the medical costs, we'll get paid. but not through a custody arrangement that tears our family apart. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a screen she'd never seen before. This is my personal banking account. The one Margaret doesn't have access to. The one that has more than enough to pay for Lucy's surgery, her follow-up care, and anything else she might need for the rest of her life. Sarah stared at the numbers on the screen. Vincent, this is more money than anyone needs to spend on themselves, but exactly the right amount to spend on the people you love. Jonathan Price arrived with a team of investigators and legal specialists, transforming the family consultation room into a makeshift war room. Within 2 hours, they'd uncovered a paper trail that exposed the full scope of Margaret's crimes. Intercepted communications, forged documents, fraudulent legal arrangements, and evidence that she'd been systematically positioning herself to inherit Vincent's company while keeping him isolated from anyone who might threaten her plans. This is enough to send her to prison for 20 years, Jonathan reported. Financial fraud, corporate espionage, child endangerment. We've got her on everything. Good, Vincent said. But that's not the most important thing we've accomplished today. He handed Jonathan a different set of papers, documents establishing a family trust that would provide for Lucy's medical care while ensuring that both Vincent and Sarah maintained equal parental rights. Documents that made them partners in every decision about their daughter's life, partners in building the family they'd never had a chance to be. Vincent, Sarah said, reading through the papers, this makes us equal partners in everything that matters. Lucy's care, her education, her future. We make those decisions together. As her parents. As a family. Dr. Woodhouse appeared in the doorway. It's time. The transport to Seattle is ready, and Dr. Rivers is waiting. As they prepare to leave for the airport, Lucy reached for both of their hands. Are we really going to be a family? She asked. All three of us together. Vincent and Sarah looked at each other over their daughter's head, and in that moment, 15 years of separation collapsed into nothing. They weren't the same people who'd made different choices all those years ago. They were better, stronger, wiser, and finally ready to choose love over fear. Yes, Sarah said, squeezing Lucy's hand. Always, Vincent added, squeezing the other. And as they walked toward the helicopter that would take them to Seattle, to the surgery that would save Lucy's life, Vincent realized that Margaret's plan had failed in the most spectacular way possible. She tried to use his love for Lucy to manipulate him, but instead, she'd given him back everything he'd lost and more. Because sometimes the thing that looks like the end is actually the beginning of something beautiful. Seattle Children's Hospital operated in a different universe than the rest of the world, one where Christmas morning meant nothing if a child's life hung in the balance. Dr. Michael Rivers met them at the helicopter landing pad, his reputation preceding him like a force of nature. Tall, silver-haired, with hands that had saved more children than most people would meet in a lifetime. Lucy Montoychin, he said, reading from her chart as they rushed through the corridors. 6 years old, progressive cardiac deterioration, genetic variant inherited from the paternal line. He looked up at Vincent. Mr. Montoya, I want you to understand what we're dealing with here. This surgery has never been performed on a child with Lucy's specific combination of factors. What does that mean? Sarah asked, her hand never leaving Lucy's as they moved toward the surgical wing. It means we're going to make medical history today, one way or another. As they prepared Lucy for surgery, Vincent's phone buzzed with an urgent call from Jonathan Price. Vincent, Margaret's making her move. She's called an emergency board meeting, claiming you suffer a mental breakdown and are making irrational decisions that threaten the company. She's presenting evidence that you've been compromised by emotional manipulation. Vincent stepped away from Lucy's bedside. What kind of evidence? Financial records showing massive personal expenditures in the last 24 hours. Medical bills she claims you're paying for a child who isn't yours. Legal documents she's twisted to make it look like you're being extorted. Jonathan's voice was grim. Vincent, she's positioned this perfectly. To the board, it looks like you've been seduced by a con artist and her sick child. Then we give them the truth. They're voting in 2 hours. Even if we expose Margaret's crimes, the damage to your reputation. Jonathan, in about an hour, my daughter is going to have experimental heart surgery. I don't care if the board votes to make Margaret CEO of the entire company. I care about being here when Lucy wakes up. Vincent ended the call and returned to find Lucy holding Sarah's hand, her small voice carrying clearly through the preoperative area. "Mama, what if I don't wake up?" Sarah's breath caught, but her voice remained steady. "You're going to wake up, sweetheart. And when you do, Daddy and I will be right here. But what if I don't? What if my heart is too broken to fix?" Vincent knelt beside the gurney, taking Lucy's other hand. "Lucy, do you know what I learned tonight?" "What?" "I learned that hearts aren't just organs that pump blood. They're the place where love lives. And your heart, Lucy, your heart is so full of love for your mama, and now for me, that there's no way it could ever be too broken to fix." Lucy considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. "Is that really true, or are you just saying that because I'm scared?" "It's really true. But Lucy, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if you get scared during the surgery, you'll remember that love is stronger than fear. That your mama and I love you enough to fight for you, no matter what happens." "I promise." "But Daddy, can you promise me something too?" "Anything. Promise me that you and Mama won't stop being a family if something happens to me. Promise me you'll take care of each other." Vincent's throat closed completely. This 6-year-old girl, facing surgery that might save or end her life, was worried about her parents' well-being. "Lucy," Sarah said, her voice thick with tears, "nothing's going to happen to you. But if it makes you feel better, I promise that your daddy and I will always be connected by our love for you, even if I become an angel." "Especially if you become an angel," Vincent managed. "But you're not going anywhere, sweetheart. You're going to wake up with a strong heart, and we're going to go home and be the family we were always meant to be." Dr. Rivers appeared, surgical scrubs immaculate, radiating the calm confidence that came from years of holding children's lives in his hands. "It's time." As they wheeled Lucy toward the operating room, she called out, "Daddy, Mama, I love you." "We love you too," they called back in unison, watching their daughter disappear behind doors that might as well have led to another world. The waiting room became their universe for the next 8 hours. Vincent paced, made calls, fielded increasingly frantic messages from his board of directors. Sarah sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the doors Lucy had passed through, as if she could will their daughter back to them through sheer force of love. At hour 6, Jonathan arrived with news that changed everything. "Margaret's been arrested," he announced, settling into the chair beside Vincent. "Federal charges. It turns out her financial manipulation extended far beyond your personal situation. She's been embezzling company funds for years, using her access to insider information for personal trading. And, this is the big one, she's been selling corporate secrets to your competitors." Vincent looked up from the coffee he'd been staring at for the past hour. "She destroyed my company. She tried to. But Vincent, here's the beautiful irony. By keeping you isolated from Lucy and Sarah, she actually saved your company. Every decision you made in the last 6 years, every deal you closed, every acquisition you completed, you did it with a clarity that came from having nothing to lose. Your company is stronger than it's ever been, specifically because you weren't distracted by the personal happiness Margaret was keeping from you." Sarah finally spoke. "So she failed completely. Spectacularly. The board has already voted to reinstate Vincent with full authority, pending the outcome of the federal investigation. And Sarah, there's something else. Margaret's been using your medical bills to create fake financial hardship claims on the company's charitable foundation. You've been subsidizing your own daughter's care through corporate fraud." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means that legally, the company owes you about $500,000 in illegitimate charges. It means Lucy's medical care has been paid for by Vincent's company for the last 3 years, just not in the way anyone realized." Vincent started laughing, the kind of laughter that came from exhaustion and irony and the simple relief of knowing that sometimes justice actually existed in the world. "She outsmarted herself," he said. "Margaret spent 6 years orchestrating the perfect crime, and she accidentally made me rich, kept my company strong, and ensured my daughter's medical care was covered. This plot twist has me shook. Drop a comment if you believe in karma, because this is next-level cosmic justice." But before anyone could respond, Dr. Rivers appeared in the waiting room doorway, still in surgical scrubs, his expression unreadable. Vincent and Sarah stood simultaneously, their hands finding each other instinctively. "How is she?" Sarah whispered. Dr. Rivers smiled, the first genuine smile Vincent had seen from him since they'd arrived. Lucy is going to be fine. Better than fine. The surgery was more successful than we dared hope. Her heart function is already stronger than it's been in years. Vincent felt his knees give out. Sarah caught him, and they held each other up as Dr. Rivers continued. She'll need follow-up care, of course, and regular monitoring. But Lucy should be able to live a completely normal life. She'll be able to run, play sports, and do everything other children do. The genetic marker that caused her condition has been essentially neutralized. When can we see her? Sarah asked. She's in recovery now. She should be awake in about an hour. Dr. Rivers paused. She's been asking for her parents. Both of them. Together. As they walked toward the recovery room, Vincent realized that in the span of 24 hours, he'd lost an empire and gained a universe. Margaret's manipulations had failed so completely that she'd accidentally given him everything he'd ever actually wanted. But more than that, Lucy's surgery had worked. His daughter, their daughter, was going to live. She was going to grow up, fall in love, maybe have children of her own someday. She was going to have the life that Vincent and Sarah had fought for, separately and together. And as they approached the recovery room, where Lucy was waiting for them, Vincent understood that the most successful acquisition of his career hadn't been a company or a deal. It had been a family. 6 months later, Lucy's laughter echoed through the backyard of the house in Queen, and not the penthouse Vincent had called home for years, but a real house with a yard where a little girl could run and play without worrying about her heart giving out. The house Sarah had chosen, with Vincent's enthusiastic agreement, because it had a kitchen where they could make pancakes on Sunday mornings and a porch where they could watch Lucy chase fireflies on summer evenings. "Daddy, watch this," Lucy called out, performing what she generously described as a cartwheel, but looked more like controlled falling. Her scar from the surgery was barely visible now, a thin line that served as a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. Vincent looked up from the grill, where he was attempting to master the art of hamburgers, a skill that had somehow never come up in his billion-dollar business education. "That was amazing, sweetheart. Show Mama." Sarah emerged from the kitchen, carrying a pitcher of lemonade, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had somehow become more beautiful to Vincent than any designer dress. She'd quit the double shifts 6 months ago, not because Vincent's money had made work unnecessary, but because they both realized that Lucy needed her parents present, not just providing. "Did you see my cartwheel, Mama?" Lucy bounded over, her energy boundless now that her heart could keep up with her spirit. "I did. You're getting so good at those." Sarah ruffled Lucy's hair, then caught Vincent's eye over their daughter's head. In that look was everything they'd built together. The trust that had been broken and rebuilt stronger, the love that had survived 15 years of separation, and the partnership that made them better parents together than either could have been alone. The doorbell rang, and Lucy raced toward the house. "I'll get it. It's probably Uncle Jonathan." Jonathan Price had become a surprising fixture in their lives, not just as Vincent's attorney, but as the honorary uncle who spoiled Lucy shamelessly and had appointed himself the family's official legal guardian against future Margaret Kellners. But when Lucy opened the door, it wasn't Jonathan standing there. It was Dr. Woodhouse, holding an enormous stuffed elephant and grinning from ear to ear. "Dr. Emma." Lucy threw herself into the woman's arms. Dr. Woodhouse had become more than their physician. She'd become the friend who'd helped them navigate the complicated process of becoming a family. "How's my favorite patient?" Dr. Woodhouse asked, swinging Lucy around carefully. "I ran a whole mile yesterday, without stopping, and my chest didn't hurt at all." "That's because you have the strongest heart I've ever seen," Dr. Woodhouse said, but she was looking at Vincent and Sarah. "Speaking of hearts, I have news." They gathered in the living room. Lucy curled up between her parents on the couch, unconsciously leaning into both of them in the way that had become as natural as breathing. "The research team at Seattle Children's has been studying Lucy's case," Dr. Woodhouse began. "Her recovery has been so remarkable that they want to use her surgical protocol as the standard treatment for other children with similar conditions." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means that Lucy's surgery is going to save other kids' lives. Lots of other kids." Dr. Woodhouse smiled. "They're calling it the Lucy Protocol." Lucy's eyes went wide. "They named something after me." "They did. Because you were brave enough to have the surgery and strong enough to recover so well, Other children won't have to be as scared as you were. Vincent felt his chest tighten with pride. His daughter wasn't just a survivor. She was going to be a lifesaver. After Dr. Woodhouse left, they sat on the porch as the sun set over Seattle. Lucy nestled between them, pointing out stars and making wishes on the first ones that appeared. "What are you wishing for, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true," Lucy said seriously. "But it's about our family." "What about our family?" Lucy looked up at both of them with those brown eyes that still held depths of wisdom no 6-year-old should possess. "I wish that we'd always remember how lucky we are to have each other. Even when I'm all grown up and maybe live far away, I want us to remember that we're the family who found each other when we were all lost." Vincent reached across Lucy to take Sarah's hand, their fingers intertwining the way they had that first night in the hospital, the way they had every night since. "We'll remember," he promised. Later that evening, after Lucy had been tucked into bed with 3 stories, 2 songs, and a promise that they'd still be there in the morning, Vincent and Sarah sat on their porch swing, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't driven down that alley?" Vincent asked. "Every day," Sarah admitted. "But Vincent, I don't think it was an accident. I think Lucy was meant to bring us back together. I think everything that happened, Margaret's manipulation, the surgery, even the custody battle that never happened, I think it was all leading to this." "To what?" "To us finally understanding that love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about choosing each other again and again, even when things get complicated." Vincent turned to look at her, really look at her. Sarah at 38 was more beautiful than she'd been at 23, not despite the lines around her eyes and the silver threads in her hair, but because of them. Because they represented years of fighting for their daughter, years of becoming the woman who'd taught him what strength actually looked like. "Sarah," he said, reaching into his pocket for the small velvet box he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "I have something for you." "Vincent, if that's what I think it is." "It's not an engagement ring," he said quickly. "I mean it is, but it's not what you think." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with 3 small diamonds, one for each of them. "I don't want to marry you because we have a daughter together," he said. "I want to marry you because in the last 6 months, I've fallen in love with the woman you've become. I want to marry you because you make me want to be the man Lucy thinks I am. I want to marry you because a house isn't a home without you in it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Vincent Montoya, are you proposing to me on our porch swing?" "Sarah Chun, I'm asking you to be my partner in everything. In raising Lucy, in building a life that matters, in growing old together, and watching our daughter change the world." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "I'm asking you to marry me, not because it's practical or convenient, but because I can't imagine a future without you in it." "Yes," she whispered, and then louder. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." They kissed as the stars came out over Seattle, and somewhere in the house behind them, Lucy was probably supposed to be sleeping, but was undoubtedly listening at the window, grinning at the knowledge that her Christmas wish had come true. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever experienced a moment where everything changed for the better? Your stories inspire every video I make, and I love reading how love finds its way into all our lives. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, because stories like Lucy's remind us that miracles happen when we choose love over fear. 1 year later, Vincent and Sarah would exchange vows in their backyard, with Lucy as their maid of honor and Dr. Woodhouse officiating. Margaret Kellner would be serving the first year of a 15-year federal sentence. The Lucy Protocol would save its 50th child, and Vincent would finally understand that true wealth wasn't measured in billions. It was measured in morning pancakes, bedtime stories, and the knowledge that somewhere in the world, 3 people loved each other enough to build something beautiful from the pieces of their broken hearts. Because sometimes the best stories aren't about finding your happy ending. They're about discovering that love was the beginning all along.